So just like everyone else, I've been bored during this lockdown. I mean, I'm still working, but after 5 o'clock, not much to do each day. So what I thought I'd do is make a short little video showing you some of the oldest tools and common everyday objects that I still use every day. Because I like to see how long stuff lasts. Let's get started. So here's my main computer rig, and hiding behind these monitors are these Sony speakers. So I got these in a kit along with an amplifier back in 1999. So I've been using these little speakers since then. Obviously there's one on either side, and there actually were 4 because it was a surround system, but 2 of them I never hooked back up, and the subwoofer I actually gave to a friend of mine because he wanted to put it under a pinball machine. Oh, and then I also have a chunk of the Berlin Wall. This printer is actually pretty old. I bought this in, I want to say 2008, which is pretty old for a printer. It is a HP P2035, and I actually had another one of these that I bought a few years after that I had in the shop, and I think Karen has it now. I love this printer. It's a laser printer, so you know, it's black and white, but that's fine. And you can get these cartridges off Amazon, generic ones for like, I don't know, 20 bucks. The next one is kind of weird. It's this Rubbermaid garbage bin. I don't even know how old it is. I just know at least how old it is because I remember when we moved in 1989, when we moved just like, 300 feet because my stepdad was fixing up a house. So we moved out of the trailer house into a real house. And my mom got after me because I was moving the garbage bin with the garbage in it instead of throwing it away. So this thing is at least 32 years old. And I almost threw it away once in 2011 when I was moving from Verona to the east side of Madison. I actually put it into the dumpster and I'm like, no, it's a perfectly usable bin. I can't give up on it now. So I'll probably have this until the day I die, which could be this year. This is my disgusting mouse pad. I made it myself. Beer is evidence that God loves us. Benjamin Franklin, inventor of electricity. I think I made this like in 2004. Oh, it's really beat up. Look at the bottom of it. I really need a new one, but it still works. Yeah, I think this was the first time that I had access to a dye sublimation printer, so I'm like, oh, I can make a custom mouse pad. But I still use it every day. Oh, this is a big one. This is my Microsoft Internet Pro keyboard. I bought this in the summer of 2000 and I've been using it ever since. So this keyboard was used to make my first GeoCities website for my Atari portables. I wrote Port Washington and Possumus Woman on it, all of the podcasts. So yes, I've been using this same keyboard for almost 20 years and it still works. And the thing that's nice about it is it's USB and PS2. So, I can keep using it forever until it, explodes or something. There's some wear on the E key and WASD, but not too bad. And I actually take it all apart and do a complete clean about every 2 years. A little dirty, but it's not as bad as it usually is. You can see it's been worn smooth. Yeah, it's kind of like the Blarney Stone. I don't know, I just love this keyboard. In fact, I have 3 more of these, I want to say. Yeah, because I have this on my downstairs computer, I have it on my Wacom computer, and then I have at least 1 backup. So I believe I have 4 of these. So since this lasted for 20 years, I'm 44, I should have a lifetime supply of these keyboards. Now again, these are the oldest things that I use every day, not the oldest things that I own. So this is my, I don't know, 3rd or 4th favorite screwdriver. It's very old. I believe it's from the 70s. I can't remember if my dad or my stepdad made this. But anyway, I commandeered it a long time ago and I still use it when you need to really pry something open. This is the screwdriver you use because back then everything was made of real steel. This one's pretty old. I distinctly remember buying this at the Sears at Westtown Mall in 2001, I want to say, because I was looking for an Atari 2600 Junior single chip, or looking for another one, I think it was, and I went and grabbed this at Sears so I could go to the nearby used game store, which is long gone, and crack open the console immediately. And yeah, I've had it ever since. It's a good screwdriver. So these came from a Radio Shack kit. And so I believe I got these in 1985, like the first time I was into electronics. Yeah, and I use these every day, or at least every time I do a project, still. Because they're made in Japan, so they just last forever. I would like carry these around in my pocket when I was like a kid, and they're still here. And if you're wondering why this looks the way it does, my sister had this habit of like putting nail polish on things. So this was completely red at one time. Maybe the idea was she wanted it to match this. I don't know. Well, it looks like they became magnetized. But over the decades, most of it's rubbed off. But I always wonder if one of these does break, I probably would maybe almost even cry. I don't know, probably not, but I would be very sad. And even though I don't use it as my daily driver anymore, these tweezers, these are the same tweezers I used to build my first Atari 2600 portable. So these are 20 years old now. And I mostly use these finer tip ones now. Then I also have some really fine Swiss tweezers that I use for really small stuff. But nowadays I use these more for kind of like the tougher tweezer jobs, like when you actually want to use the tweezers to bend something or pry something. That's what I mostly use these for. But yeah, 20 years. This is a fun one. It's my Tandy PC7 Pocket Scientific Computer. This was my present for my 13th birthday, and I've been using it ever since, and it still works. And I think I got a race back. I actually made a program for this that would actually calculate 3D print times, because when I just had the MakerBot, it would tell you the time elapsed and the percentage, but not how much time was left. So I actually had a little program on this that I would use to figure that out. So this thing has really been beat up, and my sister also scratched things into it. I still remember, I think it was like 2001, she stole my copy of Electronic Gaming Monthly just so she could cut out a picture of Edward Furlong, because there's an article about the Terminator 2 video game. And I'm like, did you cut out this page? And she's like, no, but she totally did. You know, the contrast, I guess it looks pretty good on camera, but the viewing angle isn't what it used to be. But I have all these things scratched into it. But this thing is still useful. You can even do like hexadecimal conversions with it. Surprisingly, these keys all still work, even when people would do this, which always made me mad. This one isn't really tool related, but these gloves. I have been using these gloves since 1998. I got them at a Wilson's leather goods store in a mall, and you know, they're actually, I think there's like one little tear. I can't remember where it is. Oh, there it is. There's a tear on that thumb, right? Which I could probably stitch up, although I'm not very good at that. These things have shoveled so much snow. They've pushed so many cars in the snow and other things involving snow. I mean, obviously I don't use them every day, you know, because I wouldn't wear these during the 2 months of summer we have here in Wisconsin, but they've held up remarkably well. It's kind of weird, like this one, see how it's got more sheen to it? So I don't know if I was putting this one in my pocket more. Yeah, but they're still nice. I mean, most of the stitches are still intact, you know, those gouges and stuff, but yeah, look right there. I mean, it's not too bad. This is kind of worn out. So yeah, you know, they're still good. Why get rid of them? Sometimes, just like with that keyboard, it's fun to see how long you can get something to last. In my garage now, I know people were wanting to see workshop stuff, so I guess this is part of it. So what I've been doing is basically trying to make a really cool woodworking garage, but still have enough room to fit one car, even though I never put my car in here. ShopBot, that thing is almost 10 years old now, so yeah, I've been using that for a good amount of time. Still works great. It's actually been really handy doing like house projects, so that's one of the reasons I didn't sell it when I moved the shop, because I'm like, well, you know what? This would be a killer app for home remodeling, and guess what? It is. This is the last thing I built. It's a table that has the table saw at the optimum height of 34 inches. This is an awesome miter saw that I got from my dead stepdad. It's really nice, although I need a new blade. But putting this lathe together, my uncle Dan is moving into a condo, so he said, hey Ben, you want my lathe? And I'm like, sure. So I need to finish reassembling it, but oh man, it was so heavy. Oh yeah, this is my woodworking area I'm working on. It's not done yet, I also got these plastic bins from my uncle, so even though they don't really go with the wood, they store a lot of things. So I still need to connect these pieces together, but it's getting there. Where are the old tools? Oh, I've had this thing forever. My hand sander. This is actually, people are probably gonna think I'm crazy. This is actually one of my haunted objects. I know that sounds ridiculous, but see how it's got these buttons here? And I was living with some roommates in this townhouse about 12 years ago, and I was out in the garage using this to make a new desk, which is actually the same desk that my big computer sits on. And my other roommate was in the other room playing like Final Fantasy, so I turned this thing off, and then I laid it down, and then I called to Dave. I'm like, hey, Dave, because we'd always joke about that place being haunted because we hear like footsteps and stuff. And I was like, hey, Dave, are you going to miss the ghost after we move out? And he's like, oh, heck no. And then like the punchline to a joke, I'm not kidding, this thing switched on, sitting on the floor. And I was like really spooked out by it. But I still keep it because, you know, I don't think ghosts attach themselves to objects. Well, maybe they do, but maybe that's what took the ghost into my old shop. Maybe? Oh, yes, and I'm a person of science who completely believes in ghosts. No joke. This is another haunted object. It's not old, really, but we had this in the old shop, the one, you know, we had in like 2010 to 2014. And this fan was off, and it was sitting by where Felix usually works, although he wasn't there at the time. And I was probably like 10 feet away. I forgot to tell the story when we did our shop stories episode with Allison and Max. Anyway, it's out of the blue, I hear this. Like the sound of something scraping against the tines, but the fan was just sitting there, doing nothing. And I looked over and I'm like, oh, that's unusual. But at this point, you know, we didn't really care anymore. So I don't miss that shop. It's a good fan though. You know, I'm not gonna hold it against the fan. This is really old. This is my dad's toolbox. And there's kind of a funny yet sad story associated with it. So my dad was a mechanic, and he also was a volunteer fireman. And he wrote the dates of his wedding, and then my birth and my sister's birth. Oh no, I've just doxed myself. I'm sure that's on Wikipedia. And I always wondered, after he died in 1982, where were his tools, right? I've always kind of wondered that in my mind because as I mentioned, right after my stepdad died, my mom's like, oh, you want his miter saw? And I'm like, oh, heck yeah, I want that. Kind of looks like the Millennium Falcon. So I wondered, where were Wayne's tools? So then I think it was Thanksgiving 2018. And I went home to my mom's, and I made a Flavor Wave, New Wave oven turkey, of course. And she's like, oh, your Uncle Bud wants you to go over there and pick up your dad's tools. And I'm like, what? So turns out my Uncle Bud, I have like 9 aunts and uncles because big Catholic Irish family. He's had these tools all those years. And the thing that I think was kind of sad was it seemed almost like they didn't want me to get the tools until I bought a house. And as soon as I bought a house, I'm suddenly like a real person, even though I was 43 years old or 42 or whatever it was at that time. But anyway, now I have all my dad's tools. It's mostly like wrenches and stuff, but it's all 70s craftsman's tools, so they're really nice, made out of real steel. Yeah! So, you know, I already had a lot of this stuff, but now I have even more. Also, I can't even remotely come close to picking up this thing. It probably weighs like 200 pounds. So maybe once social distancing is over, I can move it over there with the help of a friend. Yeah, anyway, these tools are all older than I am, and I actually use them all the time. Because again, it's good old real steel. Okay, workshop stuff. So when I was looking to buy a house, obviously I wanted one that could facilitate, you know, building things. And so I found this one just randomly on an open house drive around looking at house day, like one Sunday back in early 2018. My realtor had actually sent me a link to it as well as a friend, but I was like, oh yeah, I found it myself. And they were both kind of like, oh, we sent you a link for that. Anyway, what I like about it is the guy who built the house had a knife sharpening shop in the basement. So we had like this transaction window and all these doorbells, and what happens is like customers would come in the back door down the stairs, and he had another door right there that I removed, but he had that locked off so they couldn't go in the rest of his house. And it's actually zoned retail and residential. Haha. So anyway, I came back here and I was like, look at these plugs everywhere. There were plugs everywhere in the basement, all along this wall, and they had all this, well, I added the whiteboard, but this paneling was all in place. And yeah, I guess this was, over here was his, like his transaction window. I looked under here and thought he might have like a weapon, but he didn't. But yeah, he had it all wired up, kind of like a intercom thing. I need to remove all of that. But yeah, so when I saw this, I'm like, oh, I want this house. Also, it's reasonably sized for a person living alone, and it's in a pretty nice location. So yeah, this is the desk that was, you know, on the Ben Heck show. I actually extended it in that direction. MakerBot still works. And then over on this wall, I used a impact hammer drill to basically put wall anchors in. There actually were some wall anchors already, but they weren't in the right place for the TV. Then this is the TV that was in the break room. I almost never use it, but sometimes I watch like riff tracks on it while I'm working. Oh, this is one more haunted object or ghost affected object. This was the clock from the Ben Heck show. And see how it's cracked? That's from all the times it would fall off the wall. We would find this thing on the floor on more than one occasion. See, also that thing broke off, so we had to tape it in place. And I don't know if we told this story or not either, but we were right next to a shop that installed car stereos. And so whenever they put one in, it'd be like, boom, 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 right? And we couldn't film. This clock never fell off the wall when the car stereos were shaking the walls, but it would fall off the wall randomly for other reasons, so. There you go. Evidence. Better call Dan Aykroyd. So I also bolted up all of these parts containers. So those are actually mounted directly to the concrete. And I rearranged them after we closed up the shop. So this is my main bank. So I have capacitors, resistors, potentiometers and thermistors, regulators and power, integrated circuits, physical wire interconnects, microcontroller stuff, and then glue logic. I got some more stuff over here too. So I have an entire one dedicated to 8-bit computer building. So I have a collection of Z80s, Z80 serial chips, 6502, the TMS 9928 video chip, which was used on the ColecoVision. Got a bunch of SRAM, more SRAM, all sorts of EEPROMs taken from like old broken arcade machines and Cherry Masters. More connectors there. That's mostly tact switches. This is mostly diodes. And over here I have all my optoelectronics and then transistors and MOSFETs. And I also do have other spare bins laying around. Like that one is Pinatar, so that's our new pinball control system we're making. That one's for my controller monitors, which I build for video game developers. And then there's a few more here behind this laptop. Got the old Xbox controller monitors. And then this bin right here is where I store, and this bin right here is where I store all the parts for my single-handed controller mods, which I have built quite a few of. And over here is the computer that I was seen using on the Ben Heck show, along with my daily driver printer, which is a MakerGear M3. And then over here, I have my laser. I actually had to replace the motherboard on this about a year ago. I probably could have fixed it, but the laser is one of those things where I want it to just work, period. And fortuitously, the dryer in this house used to be here, so there was already a hole in the wall for the vent, so that was very handy. I have this too. This is my shooting rotisserie for pinball design. So I actually rebuilt this one. So this is the rig I used to design the game that CGC is going to be making next. And mostly what I've been doing with it right now is using it to work on our new pinball controller board. So this is, well, it's not really like the Pin Heck, it's an evolution of it. It's smaller and it's based on the Atmel Sam D21. So we basically do everything with a little ARM chip there, and yeah, it's pretty good. It's very cost efficient too. So yeah, hopefully you'll see more of this in the future. So not only does this thing rotate, you know, about 90 degrees, actually goes a little further than that, But the deal is you have a MDF bottom here, which is your Italian bottom, but then this is 1/2 inch foam core, right? And what you do is you design everything and you design it to this grid, which is just a piece of FedEx, Kinko's print, spray adhesive onto the foam core. And then when you're done with it, you can actually slide that cartridge out to scan it in and do it on the computer. And then what you do, or what I did, was I would print the next iteration of the game at Kinko's, stick it onto a foam core cartridge like this, slide it in, and then build up the next revision. So that's how I developed the last pinball machine that I was working on. And hopefully we'll see that game in about a year, although of course everything is kind of slowing down at the moment. But yeah, shooting rotisserie is really handy because it's at the right angle, 6.5 degrees. And I have all these quick disconnects for the solenoid, so it's all 24 solenoids, and then you can just very rapidly swap in what you want to do without having to rewire anything. And this is just a basic Italian bottom, but I'm just using this just to cycle the ball and make sure that everything with our board works well. Out here, this is the quote-unquote finished part of the basement. I detest the color yellow, so I'm going to repaint it eventually. Oh, here is a pinball sign that I bought from the legendary Python Angelo, and he signed it. And he had 2 versions of the sign. Obviously, there's this one. The other one was 2 people making love in silhouette on a pinball machine. And I'm like, I don't think I can hang that one up in my shop, Python. And he's like, you are afraid of your wife, aren't you? And I'm like, no, it's just not appropriate, you know, hang up at my shop, because I used to have this in my shop. So I have some space here. This is where I'm going to be working on future pinball stuff. And then I have this Swords of Fury that I'm fixing for a friend. So yeah, I basically said, you know what? I don't have any kids. I can do whatever I want in my basement. So I'm just going to turn this part of the basement into Pinball Zone. And that's what I did. And then of course I have my beloved pawn shop LCD screen. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short and sweet video talking about some of the oldest tools that I still get use out of every day. We'll see you in the next video, and maybe eventually I'll talk about electronics again. Maybe. I will.